Any idea?
This needs to be bigger. Yeah, I guess it's about as
Sorry, we got one more person.
Oh no, you guys are good. I'm gonna go outside and watch this.
Okay.
You can do it.
Okay. All right. I'll catch you around.
Yeah, I just came to grab a coffee, but
Cool. Do it up.
Okay, I guess let me join it from here.
Say this a little higher.
Is it still? Has it been dead for a minute?
Yeah, so it's pretty. Let's see.
There we go.
Yeah, that's good.
And we got speaker, right?
Oh yeah, it's kicking in. Yeah, it's good now. Not too high. That's good.
Yeah, that's
Cool. Let's see here. Yeah. I'm not gonna go much lower. Sometimes I have to go low. All right. Nope. Wait a minute.
So.
Michael. At least that shit. Travis and Pat. What the hell? I got two of these. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Not admitting, deny entry. Oh, I think I had.
What?
No, these autopilot things. It's like AI on top of AI. It's trying
to infiltrate our
to.
minds.
Cool. Wait a few more minutes.
All right.
One more thing. Yeah. This camera is cool though. Way better than.
So wait, is it backwards?
It is. Yeah, I mean, it is just. And Google Meet's stupid. It doesn't know how to mirror video properly. You know.
Do you not have a mirror option on your?
I mean, the camera might, but you have to pull up this app and it's
Gotcha.
shitty and it's this whole thing. So eventually, yeah, there's not gonna. It's all the notes are gonna go out, so that's probably the most important one. It's kind of just more for me to write and remember this stuff, you know. Oh, Travis is there. What's
Hey,
up,
Travis?
Long time no see.
Hello, everyone.
Good to see you, man. It's been a minute. We were just talking about how cool you are. For real.
Oh, goodness. That's a strong one.
Yes. Oops.
Dun, dun, dun.
That is annoying that Google can't flip.
I'm going to kick things off and give people the bio. So, who am I? My name's Justin Varner. I've been in the security industry for 18 years. I started my career as a cryptographer, which is fundamentally what I'm going to start this lesson about. Now I do quantum security, DevSecOps, security engineering. I've kind of seen it all at this point. I'm all about solving tough problems. And so I started speaking at conferences a couple years ago, but now presented 8 times, mostly about breach detection. I'm about to go to keynote besides Barcelona in May. And so a lot of my passion at this point is teaching people security. I made the realization that there's not a lot of good content. Well, there isn't anything really free for one. It costs a lot of money, and there's nothing super comprehensive either that really covers what you need to know to get into the security industry. And we need a lot of people because we have 3.5 million unfilled jobs. Every month there's like 29,000 new jobs that are added. Only 3,000 are filled. We're getting our asses kicked by the bad guys. there's an old saying that, adversaries think in graphs, defenders think in lists. Until that changes, the adversaries win. So that's kind of where we're at. So I want to teach you guys how to think more abstract and strategically. So we're going to dig in, and this is going to be a 15-week course. This is the first. The topics are sort of built on each other. They're also orthogonal, so you can kind of go off in different directions. So I'm going to cover a lot of stuff in each of these classes in an hour, and the point is you're going to have a lot of different resources and places to jump off on so that you can kind of go down different rabbit holes and see what interests you specifically, because there are roughly 15 core security domains, and that's what each of these weeks is going to cover. And within each of those domains, there's multiple subdomains. There's literally hundreds of different roles and avenues that you can explore, and it's really fun. And so also there's going to be some basic understanding of networking, infrastructure, cloud, the fundamental building blocks to understand security, because security is kind of the end of the line. You got to know the other stuff well to be good at security. So I'm going to teach you some of the basics there. Without further ado, we're going to talk about security fundamentals. So there's this study, there's a field of study called cryptology, which is essentially understanding, how to make and break secrets. And so if you break this out into the two distinct fields, you got cryptography, which is essentially the field that focuses on, making information and communication secure. And there's a variety of ways in which you do that, which we're going to talk about here. And then there's cryptanalysis. It's all about finding vulnerabilities in the cryptographic implementation, in weaknesses related to the applications themselves. The good news is that mathematics favors cryptography. It's a lot easier to go this way. For example, multiplying large primes a lot faster than trying to find the unique factors of a non-prime, but with only two factors. Imagine it's 1 million digits long. That's essentially what defines the security of our current cryptographic system. The size of the key, the fact that factorization is a lot harder than multiplication. So beyond this, cryptography, cryptanalysis, there's this fundamental concept known as the CIA, not the cat that's in action or the Central Intelligence Agency. It's the concepts of 3 fundamental pillars: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And there are other pillars that we're going to touch on below, but let's talk about each of these. If you understand these, you're going to have a good handle on security in general. Confidentiality is basically ensuring information stays secret. It's only available to the intended parties and the recipients. So you do this using techniques like, encryption is really the main method. And what is encryption? Well, you take a plain text message, like banana or something important. You run it through an algorithm, and there's a variety there, and you get this thing called ciphertext, which is depending on the algorithm, it's just a bunch of gibberish, and it's only supposed to be accessible to the person that you intend to give to that has basically the access to their private key. And so if we follow along this line, there's 2 different types of encryption, which is asymmetric. And this is also known as public key cryptography. The analogy that you always see in these books is this. You have this guy, Bob. He wants to talk to this chick, Alice, send naughty notes, let's say, right? So he goes and talks to Alice. And there's this damn broad named Eve, eavesdropper. Get it? He wants to read the messages. So how does Bob communicate securely to Alice over an untrusted domain like the internet? Well, it involves 2 different keys. Bob has a public key in private. Alice has a public key in private. For Bob to send a message to Alice securely, Alice can send her public key. So pub, key pub. Bob then takes a message. He encrypts it using her key. Says, okay, message times, Alice, key pub equals some sort of ciphertext. Sends it to Alice. Alice is the only one, so Eve's trying to get to the message because she's a nosy O'Donnell and wants to read it. But only Alice, even if she gets the intercepted message, it's of no value because it's ciphertext, it's encrypted. But Alice, with her private key, can decrypt the encrypted message and says, "Hey, baby, what you doing?" Gotta make security fun because these classes are damn dull, let me tell you. And then she can say, "Well, I'm doing you later." She sends it back in a similar fashion. So normally Bob, as a way to streamline this, he would send his public key with the message to Alice to simplify the process. And then Alice would use Bob's public key, send a naughty message back. Bob then decrypts it with the private key. That's the essence of asymmetric cryptography. It's slow, but it's strong. And it has its place. It's meant to be for longer term, like communication. When you look at keys, certificates, they last for a long time. A couple examples of algorithms: RSA, Urvesh, Shamir, Edelman, these three dudes that kind of came up with this whole concept. And then some of the more one that's like where it's more, it's based off of like non-determinism. It's called elliptical curve cryptography. And it's fascinating because it uses all kinds of entropy like parabolas to go woo, because you don't know the state of the system. I mean, it is finite at the end of the day, but these keys have less bits, less size, but they're much more random. The entropy is higher. So this is like a newer technology that won't be as easily broken by quantum. We'll get to that later. And then we've also got symmetric encryption. This one was all symmetric, as you may guess. You use one key, so one shared key. This is designed to be faster, but not as strong. An example: use a wireless protection. Use WPA3. Well, WPA3 leverages a shared key using an algorithm called AES 256-bit. It's meant just for short-term sessions, connections. It's not meant for years and years of encrypted communication. And another example is like Blowfish, or some other symmetric algorithm. Now, the best kind of design here is like some combination thereof of this, asymmetric and symmetric. You should use asymmetric for like long-term storage and things on disk. Symmetric should be more for secrets and sessions and exchanging keys and so on and so forth. So that is the essence of confidentiality. Now, if we were to then go and talk about integrity, integrity is the idea that, again, Eve might be just trying to mess with Bob and Alice, right? And if she's that, she's going to, she's going to do this for integrity. So what that means is that you want the message to not be modified in transit. If Bob sends a message to Alice, it shouldn't be altered along the way. So, otherwise, because if Eve manipulates it and says, I'm not going in there or something, fill in the blanks. And Alice like, what? And then Eve, she can manipulate the conversation. There's no integrity. So you create integrity using this thing called hashing. Now, hashing may seem similar to encryption, but it's different. Encryption's meant to go this way, that way, one way, reverse. Hashing's meant to be like chopping up an avocado, right? So it's easy to go this way, not really meant to go the other way. And so when you create a password actually and you log into a system, it should be hashed. So the system itself will store what's called a fixed length unique value. So password, for example, you run it through something called like SHA-256, which is a standard sort of hashing protocol. Password might become, I believe 32 characters, A, B, B, C, whatever. Now, the reason you don't want to use a bad password is because the hashes for easy passwords are stored in databases. And so If you just rely on that, it's very easily guessable. And so systems store this. So whatever the hash is, the system has, and then it looks at the user input. When you enter a password, if the hash ends up being the same, it grants you access. That's how this whole thing works. And that ensures integrity. It means that it hasn't been modified along the way. So this is an important concept. And then the last thing should seem somewhat obvious, but it's not entirely. Availability. Some people are like, well, how is that related to security? Isn't that related to disaster recovery and stuff? Well, yeah, and that's part of it. But imagine this. Imagine if, like, availability, you want things to be operational and accessible. So what if your badge reader doesn't work, right? And then all of a sudden people can bypass it. So like your badge reader needs to be able to, authenticate people. Your security cameras better be available, or you have complete blind spots. Your like local authentication systems, because otherwise you could use cached credentials rather than, in the Active Directory world, using this thing called Kerberos. So you could use NTLM, so on and so forth. So availability is a core concept. Also, disaster recovery, a premise of that is like being able to be operational means that you have your business is secure, it's functional, it's operational. So that creates the essence of security. And that's CIA trad. That's kind of the fundamental concept and pillars of security. So let's talk about a couple other core concepts here. And also, I didn't mention at the beginning, but if I'm going to open up the last kind of 15 minutes for questions. For now, I'm gonna go through the content just for the people that don't want to necessarily stick around to the end. So that's kind of the idea here. Cool. CIA, Catholics in Action, Cats in Action. Now, authentication is another fundamental pillar. What does this mean? It means you got to prove that you are who you say you are. You are who you say you are. Who you say you are. Now, there's 3 ways to do that. There's 3 different methods, and they are something you know, and probably something someone else knows. So an example of this is a password. Again, if it's a weak password, somebody else knows it. A PIN, same deal. There's also this thing that you all are probably familiar with. It's called knowledge-based authentication. And that has to do with asking about questions that are publicly available that are not secure at all. Like, what color car do you have? Is your 2008 Toyota whatever? What street did you live on? You can use Spokio, People, Truth Finder, been verified to find this out in like a couple minutes. So knowledge-based authentication. So passwords are going the way of the dinosaur. And one single factor. So this is called single factor. Any particular category in here of just one is single. Then you can do better. You can say, well, how about we have something you have, right? So if we add that on, something you have is like your phone. And within the phone, not all in this category are equal, right? So if you have a phone, there's various levels of good. The worst is a phone call because easily spoofed. Easily bypass phone call. The second, above that, also not trusted. Short message service, SMS. It's been compromised since at least 2017 from Signal 7. Not trusted. Also can be spoofed plus SIM swap. Then you move up to what's called TOTP, time-based one-time passcodes. If any of you use Google Authenticator, use a seed every 30 seconds or so, it generates a new code. Self-token. Little better, but not encrypted end to end. So if you send this code and you get phished on a site and you try to enter, just send it, it gets sent in plain text. And we'll get into offensive security in later weeks and you'll see how easy it is. So not great, not ideal. Plus, I don't know if any of you heard about the story from China back in 2015. They actually cloned all of the RSA soft and hard tokens that were based on TOTP. So not super strong. And then on the phone, the best kind of technique you can get is push. And the reason is because it's encrypted end to end. So an example of this is like Duo, Okta Verify, so on. And this is good. However, if your phone gets compromised, none of this matters. Also, there's this new concept. It's like it's basically like it's push bombing. I forget the exact term, but what happens is people keep sending you requests, and after a while, people get super annoyed and they just accept it. So it kind of defeats the purpose of the push. This is like becoming more and more common. So that's also why it's not completely impervious to this. But the best thing to use is a hardware key. So you can't really see here, but there's this little device in my machine. It's called a YubiKey. It's the only thing that's resistant to phishing. It uses cryptographic signatures to validate one-time passcodes, and it's really cool. YubiKey is one example. So hardware keys. So you have that. You have multi-factor. Two-factor, multi-factor. That's great. But the best scenario is adding on a third pillar. Something you are. That's a biometric indicator. So, for example, facial recognition, voice, fingerprint, all the biometric indicators, and that's ideal. So, 2 or more is preferable. 3 is the best. If you can only have 2, the second 2 categories are ideal because, like I said, something most people know at this point. So that's authentication. But there's also more. Well, wait, there's more. So once you have authenticated, that's great. You've proved you are who you say you are, but you can't do anything. Or you shouldn't be able to unless you are authorized. So probably sounds straightforward, but authorization is really the best way to do this. Authorization, it's not just saying, okay, you get in and you can do stuff. There's a lot of fine-grained sort of rules around it. So authorization means you can do what you say you can do. You can do it. You can do what you say you can do. So what do we mean by that? It means once you're in, you get to access certain apps, you get to access data, systems, it depends. And the best way to build this model is using this concept known as least privilege. Yes. And so least privilege means that you're given just enough access to do your job and no more. So, if you need to read from the database, that's all you're given permissions, not right. Don't go nuclear and give everyone admin or domain admin, and because that's often what happens in a small company. It's way harder to rein it in than to dial up because you have this whole. We're going to talk about the 3 main causes of breaches: credential abuse, client-side attacks, and administrative sprawl. That's the thing. Too many admins, too many keys to the kingdom. So in order to enforce least privilege, you use this thing called role-based access control, RBAC. And what that involves is defining permissions based off of different memberships. For example, your role, your team, your position, your whatever, any number of things that allow you to then say, okay, if you're in the security role, you can do this. It's pretty standard. Otherwise, you have to come up with special snowflake scenarios for everyone. That's not manageable. You want to have a kind of broad way, but still allow for granularity and fine-grained control. And that's why I use RBAC. And this enforces ultimately. So least privilege is the philosophy. That's how a lot of these things go. Philosophy, control. This is the idea. The control is RBAC. It leads to what's called separation of duties. So this means that you're not going to just be not every cook is in the kitchen. It means that if you're an engineer, you do engineer work. It's enforced by RBAC and least privilege. You shouldn't be over there doing marketing work. You shouldn't have finance, doing IT work. Obviously, you separate your duties. You know what your permissions allow people to do. Makes it way easier to manage. It allows you to mitigate the blast radius. So separation of duties. Those are the 5 pillars of security. So confidentiality, integrity, availability, authentication, authorization. And so this all leads to this concept, or I mean, the idea of, well, what does it mean to be secure? I love the saying from Bruce Schneier, famous cryptographer. He says this, he says, there's no real security, just various levels of insecurity. And so if you think of it in those terms, it sounds pretty bleak. But what he means is that if any adversary has enough time, money, resources, they will get in. It's not a matter of if, it's when. The whole model before used to be built on the supposition that, oh, we can build a crunchy exterior, we're going to keep people out, and we're going to pretend like, there's not nefarious activity. But this new concept called assumed breach kind of changed that. So assumed breach means, okay, we're pwned, we've been pwned. So how do we manage it? Well, we have to build layers, tranches of defense to slow them down, to make it hard, to frustrate them, so that they move on to other low-hanging fruit. That's so dumb. Low-hanging fruit. Kumquats. No, here you go. Security. So defense in depth is a common concept, like I said. And the neat thing here is when you build your model around this, you can map it directly. Like I said, we're going to talk about networking. We're going to map it to this thing called the OSI model. And so this is fundamental in networking, but it also relates directly to defense in depth. Open systems interconnect. And we'll touch on that in week 4, network security. But essentially what it looks like is this. Open systems interconnect model. It has 7 layers, sorry. So it starts at the bottom. It goes like from physical all the way up to application. And so having controls at each layer, all 7 layers. There's technically an 8th layer too, which I call the human layer. I mean, it's unofficial. Humans lay up here, but you need to have defense at every layer. So like physical security, armed bodyguards, machine guns, badge readers, cameras, all the different things. And you kind of work up and you get to this other thing called the data link, which has to do with Ethernet. So, you mitigate things like art poisoning. But the point is, yeah, they have to go through these layers. It takes time. It gives you a chance to detect and respond as well. So knowing is half the battle. Part of, that's a lot of why I give this talk called Honey Pot Boo Boo. It's about inverting the paradigm around, okay, let's just look at needles and haystacks, and that doesn't work because it takes 212 days on average to detect a breach. Let's invert the paradigm and put higher fidelity signals. That's the whole concept, using deception technology. But because what we do right now doesn't work. But so if you have detection at each of these layers as well, you have a better chance. And if you layer it together, you have a better chance of actually detecting an adversary, even building a forensic trail. And it's really effective. So that's the philosophy. How to be secure, how to be less insecure. That's all we can do. And a lot of people don't do it. And so, for example, let me talk about some real world breach case studies. And by the way, all of this is documented. There's detailed notes that'll be sent out to you with all the resources. Like I said, the rabbit hole. So I'm just going to touch on some of these breaches, but there's a lot of good material worth reading because it's fascinating how these things happen and just how egregious they are, because people just don't know. They ignore it. They don't think that they're a target. Any number of things. But again, it's not a matter of if, it's when. So real world breach studies. Let's give you 5 big ones to look at. Real world breach studies. Real world breaches. First, and this is going to go in chronological order. Check out Stuxnet. Stuxnet is awesome. Well, depends on who you are. Not if you're around. It was the first cyber weapon that did physical damage. It literally targeted centrifuges in Iran's nuclear program. It traversed what's called an air gap network. So there's no access to the outside, but it was a USB drive that came into the networks. It literally made the centrifuges spin so fast that they fell off. They got destroyed. And the idea was the U.S. and Israel wanted to delay or prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, and they didn't want to do it with airstrikes, so they tried to do this in a clandestine manner. But this happened in 2011, so 13 years ago. It's pretty sophisticated. There's a book called by Andy Green of Wire, just called Stuxnet, and highly recommend it. Fascinating. And then 2013, most everybody at this point has heard of the NSA breach by Snowden. Well, yeah, I mean, it's the biggest blunder really ever. And this is the agency that's supposed to be the most sophisticated in monitoring, alerting, and responding, and they had no clue. He walked off with like 1.7 terabytes of data. And, depending on who you talk to, here at Patriot, whatever, he exposed a lot of programs that were, skirting the law. I mean, very, narrowly interpreted as legal, but mass surveillance, eavesdropping, it was important for the public to know. Perhaps you could have gone about it differently, but the point isn't to debate it. It's just for people to know that there were some nefarious activities happening. Snowden was fascinating. That was 2013. Then you kind of move on. Also that year, Target. And Target was like a big blunder because it was like 40 million or so credit cards. It all started with like a contractor that got in, basically an HVAC contractor that got into one of the terminals in one of the stores and basically moved laterally and all throughout. There's a book called How to Hack Like a Ghost that actually takes you through a fictional scenario, but it's totally a Target. You just can't admit it outright. But it's fascinating, and really they got a slap on the wrist. The unfortunate thing about breaches is a lot of people have amnesia. Most of these companies recover. It's like nothing happened. In the US, we don't really have any meaningful data security or privacy laws. Europe has, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. We have CCPA in California. It's state, doesn't really protect people. So these things just continue onward, and they're tragic and devastating. I mean, it costs like $445 billion to the economy every year, at least. Then you move on to 2017, another gem, Equifax. So yeah, the adversaries were in here for 16 months. And the saddest thing is the security engineers knew it. They tried to tell management, what does that matter? Doesn't matter. But 143 million Americans affected, basically anyone with a credit score, credit report. There's still a database floating around. You have this thing called synthetic identity theft, which is basically people have enough information about you that they can take out fictitious loans, because a lot of lenders and banks don't validate your identity to the largest degree. So there's a ton of stories like, oh, this dude took out a $500,000 mortgage and he didn't even know about it, and crazy. So freeze your credit, but social security number is worthless at this point. And then SolarWinds, I coined this term, post-traumatic SolarWinds disorder. Get it? PTSD. So we're still feeling it to this day. This happened in 2019. SolarWinds is a network monitoring company based out of Austin. They have deep hooks into a lot of 18,000 organizations, government agencies, big companies, and they have like deep access, so they can pretty much do anything. And this ushered in the era of supply chain attacks. Essentially what happened was there was a firmware update on the build server that got pushed out that was malicious. It allowed for complete access to the SolarWinds Orion server that was then used to take over all the other components of the system, Active Directory, Linux, so on. Insidious. Somehow SolarWinds is still around, but the effects are still being felt today. And there's a bunch more, but these are like the 5 core breaches. Really worth reading. More information in the document that I'll send. And then just as a follow-up to what I was kind of touching on earlier, there's a link to my talk, shameless self-promotion, but I really enjoyed giving this talk. It's been extremely well received, and for me, it's something that I've been thinking about for, I don't know, probably 10 years. And it's fascinating because I've met a bunch of speakers at these conferences, and I tell them about this. They're like, whoa, like conspiracy counter. Whoa, what if I thought about this in a different way? But they don't. A lot of them are just like, they think this is like a wild paradigm shift, and it is. But essentially, the whole purpose of it is we want to prevent catastrophic breaches, people's information, their finances, their livelihoods. And so the talk is big, and you can watch it online. I have a link to the last one I gave in Munich last year. And it's basically, the concept is this: rather than getting needles in haystacks using what's called a SIM, a security incident and event management system, to try to correlate signals in real time, it's impossible. We're going to do this thing. We're going to use deception technology. We're going to leave like little digital breadcrumbs. And so, and these are called tokens, honey tokens. So for example, we can drop a couple of keys to Amazon Web Services, very big cloud provider, AWS. We can drop fake keys on every person's laptop. So if the CEO all of a sudden alerts us that his key's been used, he doesn't use AWS. So we instantly get an alert that goes to Slack or PagerDuty. We know that there's probably bad activity happening. Like that sort of shift completely changes the game. It basically allows you to shift from 200 some days to real time. You know, I have personally seen 4 companies not make headlines, variety of pen testers like fail within 7 minutes. It works. That's why I believe so much in it, why I travel around the world to talk about this. Another examples, like, I like this one. You can create like a Google Doc or spreadsheet, and you can say like 2024 executive compensation plan. And then they open it because they're nosy O'Donnell, right? And then it says something, and it pops open, and you drop a truth bomb on them, like Operation Northwoods or MK Ultra or Paperclip or something, and you educate them, and then they piss themselves. Oh. And there's just so many different variations. And then beyond the tokens, there's also this thing like honeypots, which are designed to be devices that blend into the environment and look just like real devices. So like a SCADA industrial control system, a web server, Microsoft domain controller. And the moment like the adversary interacts with it, fires an alert, fires an alert. You can even create like realistic web pages for authentication. They work so well that if you already run the technology in your environment, like Windows Active Directory, they recommend like not putting the honeypot in because it'll completely interfere with your environment and like cause it to be disrupted. So this is how realistic it is. And yeah, that was a good timing. I enjoyed talking to you all. Any questions? Thank you, everyone. Yeah, it's amazing how much you realize and how much you just start dumping it out.
Maybe it's just the tip of the iceberg.
I know, right? Just fundamentals, man. Oh yeah, the other thing I didn't mention, or maybe I did, is this is going to lead directly. There's going to be a bonus week of quantum cryptography, which is what I'm looking to teach a guest lecture at University of Maryland in the fall. So, and that's like next level because quantum's freaking weird, you know. Yeah, without going into too much detail. There's another otter pile here. Jeez.
Yeah, every time a new person logs
I think
in,
it's because I got a lot of people into it back in the day, and then anyway, so who's out there? You out
I got
there?
a question.
Yeah,
So
man.
with asymmetric encryption, you said it's better for long-term connections that are probably like maintained, right? Rather
Like
than
storage.
on and off. Okay.
Yeah, like disk
And
encryption.
it involves both a public and a private key. But how do you send that public key to somebody?
You can send it through any channel because it's public.
Okay.
So there's no way to derive the public from the private key. Or
So the public is just
private-
used to encrypt stuff?
Yeah, for the other person. So
Okay.
like, you know, they send you their key. It's like you use it and you send it back, but only they can decrypt it with their private
With
key.
the private key.
But like
Okay.
I said, you can kind of streamline the operation. You can send your public key with a private message.
Mhm.
You know, like for example, like so when Alice sends her public key, in the return message, Bob will send his public key
Gotcha.
below the message.
Okay.
That way you just simplify the whole thing. Because there's a
You
whole
need
other
the
thing.
private key to be able to decipher any of it.
Yeah, to decrypt it. But you can also use the private key to do what's called signing to
Mhm.
basically verify your identity.
Mhm.
So like essentially
hash it?
authenticate it.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially authenticate it. So use your private key, you take the message And then what you do is you use their public key to then basically validate that the signature is the same, you know, because they're going to send you a message and you'll validate, boom, it's the same value, you know. It's cool though. It's trippy, but it works, you know. And there's a whole other sort of field about key management. You know, I kind of didn't need to go into too much detail about the cryptography, but there's all kinds of stuff, you know, message cipher blocking, key exchange, Diffie-Hellman, you know, perfect forward, secrecy, blah, 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 blah. So on and on and on. Good stuff. I mean, that was my bread and butter. That's why I love that stuff. I thought I would be doing mathematics forever, but something dull. Let me tell you. Yeah. Mike, Brian, Edgar. Well, hold on, I did a note or something. Mike dropped a note about. Oh, good. Hey, Mike.
There we go.
Yeah, weak example. Yes. Groups, rules, policies, hardware itself, basically. Yeah.
Salesforce.
Application. Yeah, man, good stuff. Good deal. Good commentary, Mr. Mike. Turn on. Oh, it's and it recorded the whole time. Hell yeah. Okay, cool. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll see you kids next week. Next week is individual security. So it's going to be all about stuff that you can do to protect yourself, virtual private networks, password managers, home security. Interesting story. This keeps popping up, but I heard about this 3 weeks ago. There was a Florida couple. They went on vacation with their 2 kids. They, you know, have a smart home, smart garage door opener, you know, smart baby monitor, whatever. So what happened was their video camera got hacked. You know, it was poked a hole in the firewall. It's on Shodan. Adversary views it. They wait for them to go on vacation, pivot to the smart garage door opener, go in, take all the stuff, wipe the footage. Now the couple's in court because they're claiming it's insurance fraud. So, you know, isn't that crazy? Yeah, and so that's the reason why this stuff matters, to be able to protect them. And so, yeah, if you want to protect yourself, the best way is this thing called a firewall. I don't know if you can see it. No, it's this little box. So what happened was, so firewall is designed to be a, what happened was there's all these Cisco engineers. They got sick of Cisco's nickel and diming BS with open source, because basically they took a $12,000 Cisco adaptive security appliance and they reverse engineered it and made it for $300 because they open source all the components that were open source that Cisco started to charge for, like Snort with SourceFire and, you know, all this stuff. And so they were a bunch of Cisco engineers. They made this box. It monitors your whole network. It'll block all the inbound connections, all the outbound ones that aren't supposed to happen. Tells you when new devices come on. Best thing you can do for your home. Talk, you know, more in depth about what it does. But you can also, they have different models, but this one's the purple. You can actually bring it with you everywhere, and it gives you an encrypted VPN like back to your house. And it actually runs on dark fiber, so it's like faster than the internet, goes below. It's like on layer 2. So like I have a connection to like my brother in Austin there. It's slick. I mean, it's super awesome. Everybody should have one. That and a Faraday bag. But we'll talk about that next week.
What is that again? I barely caught that.
The firewall, the purple.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean the purple's the portable one, but the gold is like the home one or the enterprise one actually now.
I got it.
But yes, firewall is where it's at. Yeah, they're super cool. I mean, just the fact that they can put this for under $1,000. Good deal. Right on. Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone. This is a joy.
Thank you. Nice to meet y'all.
Yeah. See you next week. Peace.
Yeah, Coleman has one of these.